Now, earlier I spoke with Colonel Michael Edmondson of the Louisiana State Police. Something he said during that interview, it really struck me.
I think that's what parents need to do in this country. Have those conversations with your kids. What would you do in a situation like this? When you hear alarm, when you hear gunshots, what do you do? And I think they need to have those conversations. Put those cell phones away and have those candid conversations about who's your kid's friends, what are they doing, and what would they do in a situation like that. I think that's important.
Sure is. Joining me now, CNN legal analyst and former police officer Philip Holloway. So, Phil, you heard the colonel right there. I mean, what do parents need to tell their children, or really, what does anybody need to know about what to do if they find themselves inside a theater like this and someone opens fire? Unfortunately, we have to talk about it.
Well, first of all, good evening, Kate, and thank you for having me. And I'm sorry that we're having to have this discussion about this horrible tragedy that's once again occurred. The most important thing for people to remember if they're ever faced with an active shooter situation is to try as best as possible to remain calm and seek cover, and if at all possible, exit the situation. Remove yourself physically from the building or from wherever you might be. That is first. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not people could carry guns into a movie theater or things like that. That should be only done as a last resort, because in an active shooter situation, a personal sidearm is potentially more dangerous than the shooter, because you really don't know what you might be trying to shoot at. And outside of about 1 foot away from the shooter, a personal sidearm is not going to be very effective.
Well, that's a really interesting point, especially because, Phil, every time, I mean, we've discussed this, every time you go to the movies, you carry a firearm. You're obviously extremely trained to do so, but do you recommend others to do the same?
Well, that's a personal choice that everybody's going to have to make. I'm certainly not suggesting that everybody go and, without any training, strap on a gun every time they go to the movies. That's not at all what I'm suggesting. In fact, to the contrary, and I'd like to look at an example from history. If you take a look at Ronald Reagan's assassination attempt in the early 80s, his security detail, obviously very well armed, but they were not in a theater, but they were in a crowd. They had ample opportunity to pull out their guns and to turn Mr. Hinckley into Swiss cheese, but instead they chose a more prudent option, and they tackled him. Basically, they overpowered him. That is the best way to deal with an active shooter, rather than opening fire into a panicked crowd. So that would be the more accurate and more prudent way to handle this situation if you ever find yourself in one.
And real quick, Phil, from what you've heard, and we're learning these stories, how do you think folks handled this situation, this shooting?
Well, I think they handled it as best they could, and
right.
I think those teachers that we talked about earlier were absolutely heroic. Turning on the fire alarm, things like that, and calling 911, getting police there as soon as possible is absolutely key and very important, and saved lives for sure.
And saved lives. We're hearing that over and over again. Phil, thank you so much. Out front.